Oh, this is Kal Kat, the Kal Katster, and ew, about 30 years ago, less than 30 years ago, Beavis and Butt Head was a Mike Judge MTV TV show, MTV Generation show. Watched by millions. It was a silly show, Beavis and Butt Head, and they were dorky teenager posers, basically like we all were in high school. And except the funny thing is that when I was when I was in high school, it was like reversed and stuff. Like see Jim Ticon sounded like Butthead and it sounded like Beavis. So Kal Kat was sounded like the other guy, but darn it, Beavis, like but looked more like that thing. So he looked more like the Butthead and more like Beavis, but our voices are different. So. Mike Judge was inspired by our characters from Pine Hill, of course. No, he wasn't. It's just a coincidence. They're probably everywhere, as they indicated in the movie. This is a review of Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe, the long-suffering sequel 25 years later to Beavis and Butthead Do America. In this movie, it starts out with a CGI space war thing. Funny stuff. It looks like flash animation and regular animation. There's some cell animation in it, but it looks like mostly somewhat of an update of Flash. And it's a better representation of a 90s movie than Lightyear was. This is what a 90s light movie would have looked like to a 90s person in the 90s. That they copied pretty darn well what it looked like on the show. Even though the show was hand-drawn back in the day, this was a slightly update. Beavis and Butthead inadvertently destroyed the science fair, led by the science fair dork hippie guy. Then they get sentenced to court, and in the courtroom, the guy saw touched by an angel. So the black judge guy, lets him off. They established that the series takes place in Texas. They didn't make that entirely clear on the show that it was Texas, but if you watch the Beavis and Butthead collection with Mike Judge and the commentary track, it's supposed to be Texas. In fact, King of the Hill, the show that came later, is a spin-off of it with people that are their neighbors. So it's they're supposed to be that. And Daria is also a spin-off of People That Are Their Neighbors. Daria was a little less successful than the other one. Daria had a character from Pine Hill in it as well. Daria, of course. At Pine Hill, she was Aurora, but Daria there. Anyway, so, but yes, there were a lot of connections to. There's always somebody that fits that role, because it was very everyman type of show. It was silly as all that. And the Beavis and Butthead collection has of course they had to cut out all the music videos because they couldn't get permission to show them. So it's kind of weird watching it because they had to take out just leave the sketches and take out the music videos. Now, originally they aired in a similar way to how Rick and Morty aired. Rick and Morty started out as a flash animation joke of Doc Brown and Marty fellatiating each other in space, and that led to Rick and Morty, and that it was originally a gross joke thing with that. Beavis and Butthead started out in a similar way, in that they started out in the Sick and Twisted Festival of Animation, which are art house theaters in downtown San Jose, and in the other theaters in San Jose, the Grindhouse theaters, which still existed back then. I think there's a version of the Grindhouse theater still there today. It's one of the cameras, but that original one is gone. And we would go and see the Sick and Twisted Festival of Animation, and there would be a Beavis and Butthead cartoon. This is the early 90s. So it's just and there would be this cartoon, and they would do crazy stuff. And Beavis and Butthead would come out, and they would do really dangerous, crazy shit. Like there was this one in which the fire one that people thought kids started fires because of Beavis and Butthead, and they had to take it off MTV. But no, they didn't. Kids were always doing that. We We did that shit 10 years before Beavis and Butt Head. Oh, let's burn our toys and stuff. Yeah, we doing shit like that. That's part of the reason we can't show Trends 2 in its entirety. Is that we were setting toys on fire. We did show the Optimus Prime though. That was in '94, but that was later. But we were then old enough to know better, and there was adult supervision, so we made sure not to. We were adults, so we put it out afterward. But yeah, the Transformer and the Hibachi. I think everybody tried that. Don't do that at home. But anyway, so the Beavis and Butt Head. The other one was the cow one, which they showed parts of, where Mr. Anderson's cow is because Butthead gets crushed by the cow. In the original Sick and Twisted version, it's basically Happy Tree Friends. And he gets out the chainsaw and he goes, bring all over the face of the cow. And he goes, whoop, and all this gore goes. He killed him. Basically, like, chopped him up. He's like, oh, God. And then the next scene, they're covered in cow blood. And they're, like, sitting there going, oh, shit, that sucks. There was another one that was racially offensive, where they're, like, watching racial... like insensitive, making jokes about people's eyes slanting and stuff. Yeah, and doing other racial things, and then they almost did a blackface one at one point. There were a lot of really offensive ones they couldn't show on MTV. There was a monster truck one where it was kind of violent as well. But those ones didn't air on MTV. But the Sick and Twisted people went to MTV, and those did not air on MTV. So those people, the parent groups that were freaking out, those did not air there. Those were at the Sick and Twisted Festival Animation. The MTV version, like when Weird Al did his crazy song parodies, they were never dirty, but parents assumed they were because kids immediately did dirty versions of his songs. He was never dirty. But it's kind of the same idea. The MTV, these troublemaking kids, violence and whatever. But they're cartoony looking and, slapstick, basically. So, that's the backstory of Beavis and Butt Head. And then we get to the space story. So, they get back to the new story. In the original, it was the Clinton era, and they went to the White House, and then a bunch of crazy stuff happened. They went on a road trip, and they met their father, and then their fathers, and they were other Beavis and Butt Heads. And then met Chelsea Clinton, who was at that point supposed to be a teenager, and she pushed him out of her room or something. And it ends. That was before Bill Clinton got in trouble, so technically. But yeah, and it is a true story that Chelsea Clinton was at Shoreline Amphitheater College, and my sister saw her in the audience at Shoreline. I don't think she met her. I think they saw her. That's Hillary Clinton over there. Chelsea Clinton, there's an entourage. Yes, I didn't, but just saw her there. Anyways, but that has no relevance to this at all. So in the sequel, they've destroyed space. Yes, they've destroyed science fair, and the judge figures they're troubled youths. I forget the word he used, but it was troubled youths. So he's like, all right, I'm gonna send you to space camp, and which doesn't make sense. So he sends them to space camp, and they go to space camp. All the animation in this at this point when they're back in '98 is drawn like '98, and the later stuff is too, and they do a really good job imitating that as opposed to the Lightyear movie, which made it look too good. It should have looked like this. It should have looked not as good. But yeah, so we have Beavis and Butt Head going like this. This was on Amazon Prime if you want to see it. If you have Paramount Plus or Amazon Prime, you should watch it. It's a Paramount movie, MTV movie. But yeah, so they go to space camp, and through a misunderstanding, a series of misunderstandings, they have a device that's supposed to dock with a mirror space station. It looks like a dick going into it, and they're under the bizarre mistaken impression that the captain lady is gonna have sex with him up on the spaceship instead of docking the space station. Somehow they get to go into space and be astronauts. They of course screw up the docking and ruin your space station, stranding them, and then they're gonna go see a black hole, which drifts into the solar system somehow. It's a cartoon, sure. Also, it's a wormhole like in Star Trek, and the black hole. Even though it shouldn't be a black hole, it would be a wormhole. But okay. And it's a big butthole. I don't want to be sucked into a butthole. Oh. And so they go into space, and some of that is done a little better than it would have been in the 90s, but that's okay. It doesn't overshadow the story. So they go to... so they don't score. They end up going outside the shuttle. And the other astronauts pretend... because they're messed up in the head or something, and they pretend like they sacrificed themselves to save the mission, and it was all a ruse. They could get rid of them, which is messed up. And the Captain Lady turned evil. And they go to the black hole, which happens to be adrift in the solar system. And they get sucked into it and transported to the year 2022. They arrive in 2022 and they see like a sign for a festival. It's in the trailer, and it's not 2022. It's that he's laughing about. It's 69th annual at the top. Yeah, 69. Okay, so then apparently in this future, the governor of Texas is the NASA lady in this other timeline. And she is apparently evil, and she wants to find. She doesn't know how they could possibly be back. And then the alien research people are looking for them. I think they're also people from the shuttle. They're all from the shuttle. And the alien research people are looking for her, and her lieutenant governor is still the first officer from the shuttle. You would think that all of them would have been long since not doing that anymore. I'm assuming this is a separate timeline where all this other stuff happened just because. And there's spoofing Stranger Things, among other things, Season 2. Which I've not seen Stranger Things Season 2, but that is what they're making fun of. I've read synopsis. That's what they're making fun of. And so we have... and they're making fun of the black hole and a number of other things. And the time machine. If you're going to steal from something that's popular. So they go, if you're going to steal, people don't steal good ideas from people that aren't famous. So they stole from famous works and used them. That's what I mean. Yeah, don't steal kids. No. And so we have, Mike Judge is all over this. Said he would never do another one. They did that. Then they did that Jackass 3.0 scene, which had a guy that looked kind of like the choir director in the Jackass 3, and he did the Mr. Fart scene, and it's him. Oh. So, I wasn't. Yeah, no, it wasn't him. It was his brother, but it looks a lot like him. But anyway, it wasn't him. But Mike Judge was in it, and he did do a fart scene. But they were allegedly killed off in the show. And they kept using in the show. They killed them off in the TV show. They kept showing this preview thing like they were going to get assassinated, like out of if there were blood. and Jim Chacon didn't get it. He's like, oh, are they really going to kill them? Cool, they're going to kill them, and they don't kill them. But it was a joke. It was just spoofing a movie from that time. Not If There Will Be Blood, but a pre-release movie that If There Will Be Blood copied. They were spoofing the whole horror genre ending idea. These guys are going to get taken out. They were spoofing that. So that's fine. King of the Hill was more successful. There was an outtake with the King of the Hill people. There's a bunch of cameo things in this. So Beavis and Butt Head are in Texas. The whole thing's set in Texas. And finally established where everybody is, where the town is. Trying to get back to their town. They end up at a college at one point. I guess Jason Run. And in a gender studies class, which is funny because I've been in a gender studies class. Yeah, so I was in one once. Yeah, in San Jose State. But this is a community college. For some reason, they have one there. That doesn't make sense. But there's a gender studies class in Texas, and the teacher is apparently the hippie guy from the original story, like 30 years earlier, and he's now transitioned to a woman, and he's like 70. It's probably not, but is wearing the same kind of the same outfit, kind of the same shawl, the same glasses, same mannerisms, but he's acting like transitioned, which is awesome. They actually did that scene better than the Buzz Lightyear movie. They went even further than the Buzz Lightyear movie. Just at this one little scene where they said, "Ooh, she likes women." They went further. They said there's a transitioned man who's become a woman in the story, and she has like 3 lines in it, like for 20 seconds or so. They went there, so that's awesome. And nobody's complaining about that. Nobody's all butthurt about Beavis and Butt Head showing a transitioned man who became a woman, transsexual person. It's clearly what that character is supposed to be. If not, it's their twin sister who's the same age. Sure. but yes. And then they get white privilege and they go around beating up on the cafeteria. Well, earlier on, though, in the story, they had to make a joke about it. Early on in the story, they get a hold of this Swedish family's cell phone, and they look like the King of the Hill people. They pushed them off the pier by accident. They look like the King of the Hill people. And then there's a few weird. There's all kinds of flashbacks, moments, there's gags in here. There's other Beavis and Butt Heads of various kinds in the town and the other places. They go into prison at one point, and he wants a tattoo on his Butthead wants a tattoo of a butt on his forehead. He doesn't get it, but because Beavis gets the drug, the prisoner, a big prisoner guy hands him the drugs to hide the drugs. He's going to do a cavity search, and he eats them instead. He eats the drugs, and he becomes Cornholio, addictivi for me bangola. Which I became Cornholio, but not from drugs. There was I did that for Halloween. Of course. Beavis and Butt Head. Because Jim Tickon and I were Beavis and Butt Head, so we might as well just have done it, So we did. I am Cornholio, and I need TV over my bangola. Actually, goes like this. I am the almighty bangola. Yes. Anyway. But yes. But yeah. So. Oh boy. So yes, and he becomes Cornholio, and that tells him to get more toilet. The prison warden decides to free them because he realizes that they're special somehow. It's like they're totally making fun of the whole American prison system, gender studies system, the whole. They clearly Mike Judge is liberal. He's making fun of all of these hyper-conservative guy who was making him look dumb, basically, through the whole movie. Hyper-conservative governor lady who is now the governor lady, and she wants to like devastate the thing. I'm thinking they're making fun of conservatives in this movie a lot, and it's butthurt about it. They probably think it's part of it, but no, they're making fun of them. Beavis and Butt Head are not conservative by any means. Liberal. So they go and they just make fun of everything. So they get out of prison. The evil governor lady's chasing them. She's the bad guy. They go back to their house, which has been renovated, and there's a scene in there. And then at one point they have the cell phone, and they do like the cell phone dropped into the toilet in the porta potty scene, which is earlier when they're on their way there, the construction site, and they do the whole they did a spoof scene that's running through it of Beavis being in love with his Siri on his phone, because they're spoofing that Her movie, that guy who was in love with the Siri on his phone. Of course, that movie was ripping off an earlier Twilight Zone episode, modern Twilight Zone episode. So, yeah. One of the few of that new modern Twilight Zone that was any good, because that newer one from like the late '90s, early 2000s. I said the early 2000s one. Yeah, the early 2000s one were pretty good. The '90s one was. This one is really not very good. That's yeah. So they spoofed that, even though that would be like earlier. But they came from the '90s, so maybe yeah. Cell phones were a Siri sort of thing. I think the Siri came along in 2007, so they wouldn't have known about it because they came through time travel. But what's helping them is smart Beavis and Butt Head, or aliens, who seem to be played by Silly Kelly and Morton Roadkill, who are playing smart Beavis and Butt Head. And they're just slightly different. Their voices are kind of switched, and and in another timeline, they live to be adults, and they show that at one point. They're first gonna find the way home on Everest, and then they find the way home behind the college. That's why they go to college, and then finally the way home is in their room in the house. They're back in their bathroom where they jerk off. But the evil governor lady comes to realize after all the shenanigans that the whole thing started because they misinterpreted what she was saying way back at the NASA thing at the space camp, in that they thought they were going to have sex with her. So they thought they were going to score, and that was all it was. They thought they were going to score. And she ends up going with the smart Beavis and Butt Head scoring on the Beavis and Butt Head planet. All the Beavis and Butt Heads of every timeline, including the Pine Hill one. They're all there on the planet. The king and queen are basically the king and queen of Beavis and Butt Head are basically Mark's Cards and Sarah from Star Crackers, or Clark and Sarah from Star Crackers. Mark's Cards playing both, and they're the king and queen, which is hilarious. It's okay. Yes, but no, we're not. We just went in drag. It's transsexual. It wasn't even transsexual. We just did it because there weren't any girls on our show. So we're like, we don't have any girls. We couldn't score. So we were like, okay, let's just pretend to be girls. Didn't work. Anyway, so yes, didn't work at all. Not convincing in the slightest. But yes, but yeah, the gender studies class. Yeah, it's that gender studies class. I had one at San Jose State. But anyway, they resolve the story and they get home. They get to stay in 2022 in their timeline. So in this other timeline, they're still teenagers and they're 2022. But in another timeline, they got to be in Jackass 3 in the beginning, and in the end. And in another timeline, they grew to be old. And they're still in the house going, and in other timelines, their entire town became Beavis and Butt Heads, and there's like a rip in the universe that created them too. And so yeah, so it's all bizarre. Well, very funny, very very stupid and juvenile, but funny. I appreciate the that they still have the humor, the satire. Stuff of which hyper-conservatives will not get. And then it does have some very funny moments in it. It's weird how they draw the people looking older. Kind of off, but kind of works. The Flash animation is a little strange at times. But yes, better than Lightyear did theirs. Lightyear was too advanced looking. It should have looked like a Flash animation thing. Or even earlier. Like an early... late 80s, early 90s, like Dingo Pictures almost. It should have looked worse than Toy Story, not better. But, yeah. But in this case, they did it right. They made it look like Beavis and Butt Head. Even though, at times, yeah, the car chase sequences were clearly done with CG. The space war in the beginning was done CG. But yeah, there's a funny scene where the lieutenant guy turns on the governor lady and tries to get them to escape in his car, and they go back into the room thinking they're going to score again. But they can't get the cuffs back on because they've locked them. So it's funny. There's a lot of clever little gags in this movie. The white privilege scene was funny. Them explaining it was funny. You don't explain the joke, you just make the joke go, they start knocking things around because, But it's not necessarily what's giving them the privilege that's letting them knock things around. It's that they're slapstick. It's that the whole town is slapstick, so they don't mind. They're just acting weird and kicking each other in the balls. It should probably have had, for the parent groups out there, it should probably had a warning in the beginning saying, do not try the stunts in this cartoon. But they didn't do that, so don't try the stunts in this cartoon. Don't do what's going to go on in here. But I think they're going to know the animation is goofy, so they're going to know. It's good. I liked it. Beavis and Butt Head. Do the universe. or in this case, don't do that. Really good. There's some kind of gags in there. Yep. So, but that was author. But they didn't talk about that in the 90s. They just didn't. And I like that this movie did address that. Sort of. They didn't directly say, so they got away with it. If you weren't paying attention to the hippie guy from the beginning, you wouldn't have made the connection with the old lady 24 years later. But I'm sure you're supposed to make that connection. So, in the story. So, So, Beavis and Butt Head. I don't know what all that stuff. I'm going to edit some stuff from this. Anyway, so Beavis and Butt Head do the universe.